Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Welcome again to Sufi Ibrahim Krebs's channel, YouTube. And today we're going to get off politics. Enough Middle Eastern politics. We had enough problems with that. And we're going to go back to our Sufi sources. But before we do that, there's one very important subject that I insist on covering. Okay, the subject is called epistemology. Fancy Greek word meaning the science of knowledge. Okay. Now, I've been talking about this subject for a long time. I still don't have one single person who gets it. Not one person, including some students who have been with me for a long time, who can say to me, Ibrahim, you're really onto something here. So this just shows you how deep our rational, logical conditioning is, that I talk and I give Quranic citations and I explain the modalities, and still no one is using it. Everyone is still going back to their mind productions. Okay, so if you don't get it right away, you're not unusual. You're the norm. Now, I guess it took a long time to get there myself, but the epistemology that we are proposing, that we are recommending, is the opposite of the epistemology that all of you, any of you who have been taught, I don't know, they probably start teaching you this in grade 3, all the way up to postdoc PhD people. You're all learning Aristotelian logic. And every time I say something that isn't in someone else's mind, they give me back their mind productions. Either, yes, I agree with you, which means they haven't heard anything new from me, or no, there's something else here I want to say, and then they give me their mind productions. In either case, this interaction is useless. What people are usually responding is, oh, this is already in my mind, so you're right, or this isn't in my mind, so you're wrong. So they're referring back to their mind productions. It's very deep, because I see people who are in Sufism. We just had a group visiting us. They were all full of these rational mind productions. How long is the meeting going to be, and what are we going to eat, and when are we going to finish, and what is the purpose, and what is the philosophical principles behind the meeting? Mind productions. Those people say they're the disciples of Sheikh Nazim, but they haven't gotten the most fundamental teaching of Sheikh Nazim, which is and they read it from their books. It says, the products of the mind are not the same as the products of the heart. So we're teaching the heart. Not the heart of the French romantics, who say, le cœur a ses raisons que la raison ne connaît point. The heart has its reasons that reason cannot understand. And what they're usually doing there is justifying romantic love, which is a sure recipe for disaster. Okay, so we're not talking about that heart. We're talking about the subtle heart. In Arabic, fuad, or afida in the plural. Okay. The subtle heart is also the site of the intuition, the site of subtle perceptions. It's not the heart that's raging with anger at the Palestinians, at the Jews, at the Persians. That's not the fuad. That's not the subtle heart of our epistemology. The other two elements are hearing and seeing, samia and basira. Okay. I was thinking about hearing recently, because what the scientists reject as anecdotal is what I call fundamental hearing. Someone tells you that this medication gives me this side effect, this is how I feel on it. If you're hearing, inner hearing function, you get it. Even if it isn't in the pharmacopoeia, even if it isn't in the abstract about that medication, or the CPS, or the PDF, I think it is in America, PDR, Physician's Desk Reference. Even if it isn't there, if the patient feels it, it's reality. Listen, hear them. If someone tells you a truth and your inner ear is functioning, you'll hear it as the sound of truth. And it doesn't matter if it comes from someone who generally has no idea of truth, or if it comes from Trump, or if it comes from your enemy. Truth is truth. Okay? And we have to develop the ear of truth. It's not the same as the voice of the majority. Okay? In Muslim terms, we have the famous Hudaybiyah incident, where the Prophet, peace be upon him, wanted to sign a peace treaty with the Quraysh, and all the Sahabas, all his companions were against him signing, because he had to sign a treaty where it didn't say that he was a prophet or a messenger. So everyone except one of his wives that he brought with on the trip, she said, you know best. If this is what your Lord is showing you, you know best. Ignore the majority. Ignore the consensus. How many people are able to ignore the consensus around them, whatever it may be? Now we have a quarrel, a conflict in the Middle East, and the Muslims give you the Muslim consensus, and the Jews give you the Jewish consensus, and the Persians give you the Persian consensus. They're all repeating their socially conditioned mind productions. And by the way, that mind includes coarse emotions, not the subtle ones, but the coarse ones are part of that mind. So if you're enraged, if you're in fear, if you're in love, all of that is part of the mind that misleads you. There are people who have understood this, okay? And they certainly aren't the scientists. So what do the scientists do? What does the scientific community do? Okay? What do they tell you? How are they? We want to figure out what's really going on with this COVID. What are we going to do? We're going to accumulate data, more and more and more and more data, pages and pages and pages, and then we're going to crunch the data with sophisticated statistical analysis, and from all of that we're going to come out with the truth. Wrong. Batil. They're not going to come out with very little truth comes out of that. As far as I'm concerned, 2 or 3 anecdotes are more powerful than the most sophisticated scientific study in knowing what's going on. When I used to use medication, I would read the monograph and see what they said, but then I would listen to my patients. And by the time I had 5 or 6 people on a new medication, I knew what it could do, what it couldn't do, most of the problems that were involved in it. That would be ridiculous for the scientists. No, we need hundreds of people to do sophisticated statistical analysis, or we can't know what's going on. Wrong. Okay, so when they came out, for example, maybe some of you have had issues with this, I hope not, but when they came out with Prozac, the first new SSRI medication, and you look at the monograph on Prozac, and it talks about sexual difficulties, they were saying 3% of the population. It's ridiculous. You're in practice and you see it's maybe 70%. But the official scientific publication says 3%. That's how wrong they get it from collecting data and crunching it with statistical analysis. Okay. Now, there were people who got this a long time ago. One of my favorites, possibly yours, C.J. Jung. I love this quote. It's in my first book, and I'll repeat it until someone comes to me and quotes it back to me. Maybe then I'll stop. And I won't stop about epistemology until most of the people around get what I'm trying to say. Because it's critical. It's critical. Because the scientists have got us in a total mess, with their forms of analysis. And on top of that, they're dishonest. I go on sometimes about these electrical vehicles that all our governments want to advocate for us. And no one is doing the studies to find out what are the health effects of these electrical vehicles. You won't find. I've been through PubMed from the library, the National Library of Medicine. There's no serious studies about health effects of electric vehicles. Millions and billions they want to put out of vehicles. No one's studying the effects. And even if they are, sometimes they miss it because they're not looking for it. So let's start with one wise man. Maybe some of you have heard this quote. This is from C.J. Jung. He said, this is probably in the 1940s. Many scientific-minded persons have even sacrificed their religious and philosophical leanings for fear of uncontrolled subjectivism. By way of compensation, he writes like a poet, by way of compensation for the loss of a world that pulsed with our blood and breathed with our breath, we have developed an enthusiasm for facts, mountains of facts, far beyond any single individual's power to survey. We should say far beyond any institution's power to survey as well. We have the pious hope that this incidental accumulation of facts will form a meaningful whole. Well, it won't. And we have a lot of proof to that effect. Okay. So what do they say in medicine? What's the biggest catchphrase in all of medicine? Hadi?
Double blind.
Yeah, that's the second most common. The first is evidence-based medicine. They pummel you with this every time you go to a conference like I used to go to. Evidence-based medicine. And the evidence-based has to be, as Hadi was saying, randomized, placebo-controlled, double-blind, multi-center study published in a prestigious peer-review journal. Quite a mouthful. That's their definition of truth. I always thought truth was a simple thing. No, it has to be a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, multi-centered, multi-million-dollar, they don't say that, study published in a prestigious, not an ordinary peer review, because they rejected all kinds of peer-reviewed studies on ivermectin. No, a prestigious peer-reviewed journal like Lancet, New England, Journal of Medicine, American Journal of Medicine, etc., etc., etc. That's truth. Okay. And they misled us and cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives by this scientific, pseudo-scientific rigidity that they imposed upon us. So, first of all, in Islam, the first saying is La ilaha illallah, the testification of faith. There is no Ilahi, there's no God beside God with a capital G. There's no small gods. There's no idolatrous gods. So we start by denouncing the falsehood, and then we go to the truth. Okay. So the falsehood here is empiricism. The biggest falsehood is outwardness. We only look at, and the scientists will say it outrightly, we're only interested in what is measurable. Many years ago, I had an argument with an old friend who had become an epidemiologist. That's not the same as an epistemologist. The epidemiologists are part of the problem here. And he said, I can use epidemiology to answer any question in life. I can design a research protocol. So I said, can you prove that Mozart's music is beautiful? I was ornery even then. He's become very successful because he does the politically correct epidemiology, the study of statistics and the distribution of diseases and their causes, and it's all statistics. The A Z, from the beginning to the end, it's all statistics. And they continuously mislead us with their statistics. As Benjamin Disraeli warned the British people, there are three kinds of lies. One of my favorite statements from Britain, there are three kinds of lies. Lies, damn lies, and statistics. And now we have even more now we can add three kinds of lies. Lies, damn lies, statistics, and algorithms that they derive from those statistics. Okay? So now we're advanced now. We have four kinds of lies instead of three. Sorry, Disraeli. Okay. So that's the illusion. That's the batil. That's the falsehood. That's all around us. Every government, every decision, they have these large commissions of inquiry and hundreds and thousands of witnesses and thousands of the Warren Commission. People are still debating it now, the Warren Commission. How many millions and millions of dollars they spent on the assassination of Kennedy, and they still haven't come to a conclusion that the majority of Americans can believe in. Okay, so there's a lot of machinations there. It's not only a problem of statistics, but the point being that all this effort and all this data and all this documents. You know, Hadi and I were, just to give you an example how this is in our everyday life, we were looking for a property and where we can start a community and a farm. And so the real estate agent is hesitant, and finally she says, you know, there was a building inspection and the owners want you to see the results of this building inspection because they're afraid it will scare you off. The building inspection report. This is an ordinary, small farmhouse with a small piece of land. 57-page inspection report. The first 2 pages are just protecting them legally to tell you everything they don't cover. So the real estate agent called back Hadi and said, the last offer, they canceled it. They were too afraid by this building inspection. It's like this society has gone mad. 57-page report of all kinds of details of this building. If they were selling a nuclear plant, I might think this is a credible amount of information. Selling a small house with a small piece of land, this is outrageous. My brothers tell me in America that when they were running businesses, this was before Trump, he reduced it a bit, but their average income tax report per annum of a small real estate enterprise, they owned a few buildings, 140 pages. I think my own report, actually, my last income tax report in Canada ended up being like something like 60 pages. This is Michigan, as they would say in Yiddish. This is outrageous insanity. Making everything so complicated. Okay? So that's the illusion. That's the idol of empiricism, materialism, outwardness. And what is the reality? The reality needs to be perceived in a much more subtle way. Actually, the reality is reflected in the inner more than the outer. You don't have to measure it. You see a person, I won't mention any names, but our Prime Minister of Quebec, you see a person and you can tell if you've developed your basira, you see his quality. Why would anyone want to vote for him? because they're not listening with the ear of truth. They're not seeing with the inner eye. They're just listening to the discourse, and if he feeds back to them their own mind productions that they already have, then he gets elected. Yeah, we like this guy. He has the same thoughts in his foolish mind that we do. So we're going to vote for this guy. That's not the way. That's not the way. So we have Samia hearing the truth. Stay open. It comes from strange people. Sometimes I have people in my life, I don't really think they're really onto it, what's really going on, and that they come out with the truth of a certain situation. Alhamdulillah. That's the ear of truth. Don't be biased. And there are other people that we love, like some of our shuyukh, and sometimes they come up with nonsense. Yeah, I realize over time in Sufism, my most important sheikh was Sheikh Nazim. He was the one with the largest breadth of vision and the most wisdom, and he was very good with people. But occasionally he'd come out with, there was this guy who came to me, I still remember, at Peckham Mosque with an ear infection. And his ear was still draining. And I said to him, what are you doing? He said, I'm putting in olive oil. I said, that's not going to do much. He said, why are you doing that? I said, the sheikh told me olive oil is enough. I said, well, if you want to go deaf, I guess it's enough. But if you keep that infection going, it was draining and pussy and bloody, I said, if you keep this up, you're going to lose your hearing, at least in that ear, or maybe in both ears. Go see a GP in England. They're good. The general doctors I found in England were very responsible people. There are exceptions, I know, but I was pleased with them in general. Luckily, he listened to me. But his sheikh was giving him bad advice, foolish advice. So no one is right all the time, and no one is wrong all the time. So you see the anti-never Trump people. He's always wrong. But he was right about a bunch of things. He was wrong about a lot of things also. But he was right about a bunch of things, Trump, for all those Trump haters. And they'll never acknowledge it. This is where pride comes into the equation. In order to be open, you have to drop your pride. When that lady in San Francisco said to me, spirituality, man, that's where it's at, I thought she was an idiot. But that was my pride answering, my intellectual pride. She wasn't very smart, but she was totally on the mark. And I've been using that statement following that statement for 45 years. Spirituality, man. That's where it's at. And that's where it's at. And what we're talking about is the spiritual approach to knowledge. In the Quran, it's a bit of an aside, but in the Quran, it talks about the non-believers. And it says that the non-believers are deaf, blind, and dumb. But society has advanced since then, quote unquote. The modern politicians, they're still blind and deaf, most of them. They still don't hear when their constituents say there's a problem. Most of the time they don't hear. If they do, it takes a long time. They still don't see into things. They just see the surface, but they're well-spoken. They're blind, deaf, and well-spoken. Now that's a bigger problem than blind, deaf, and dumb, because when you're dumb and you can hear the dumbness, then you're put off by it. But because people are trained by our academic institutions to just listen to the content, to just listen to the outer, they buy into this stuff often, especially if it's the same stuff that's in their mind. A couple of quotes, a couple of my favorite quotes in this regard. Clint Eastwood in The $1 Million Baby. A lot of you have probably seen that film. He's talking to the female boxer that he's training, and he's saying, you know, boxing isn't as dumb as people think it is. He said, the right move is often the opposite of the instinctive move. The right move is often the opposite of the instinctive move. When I heard that, there was a shiver went down my spine. I said, wow, Clint Eastwood's not one of my favorite directors, not one of my favorite people. Gunslinging Western movies, it's not my thing, not my speed. But when I heard that, wow. Why? Because that's true in life very often. The right move is not the same as the instinctive move. So watch your inclinations, watch your instincts, because they may be leading you towards a disaster. If you haven't seen that in yourself, I'm sure you've seen it in other people. Yes, Paul?
Yes.
The other quote I love is from Byron Katie. I'm watching the time, don't worry. I have my supervisors. Yep. Byron Katie says to the audience of 200, 250 people around her, she said, all your problems come from the same place. Everyone yelled, what do you mean all my problems come from? All your problems come from the same place. You believe in the contents of your own mind. And if you can find someone who doesn't do that, who doesn't believe in the contents of his own mind, follow them. Because your mind is constantly deceiving you. So she was really onto something. But this takes training to detach from your mental contents, to empty your mind and listen to your intuition. The Christians called this contemplation. And the scientists use this contemplation process also. You think, but you don't pay much attention to your thoughts. And finally, an ilham, an inspiration, a tajalli, something descends, and then you're like Archimedes in the public bathhouse. Eureka, I got it! The inspiration comes. When that inspiration comes, and this is really part of the epistemology, once you know something, you have to act on it. Okay? The protocol says, ilm, amal, hal. Knowledge, which epistemology brings you to, then once you understand, once you know something, then you have to act on that knowledge. And once you act on that knowledge, it changes your internal state. That is the essence of the spiritual process. But I've seen so many people, and the Quran talks about this too, that know something, they don't act on what they know. They act on their feelings, they act on their mind productions, they act on the social influences around them, and they don't act on what they know. May Allah protect us from this. May Allah protect us from the vagaries and the delusions of our own mind, and may He bring us to truth in every situation, regardless of the nature, whether it's business or family or school or interaction with people. May Allah bring us to see the truth and act from the truth in each of these situations. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Al-Fatiha.